Hello and welcome to another Performance Architects How-To. Performance Architects is a business and technology consulting company that helps companies initiate and sustain big changes in their performance management and business intelligence environments and process. This video, along with others on our channel, should help provide some additional insight as you embark on or continue along your EPM and BI journey. Head over to our channel after this video or come back in the future to learn best practices, hear overviews, and take part in lessons we have designed to help you. We are focused on continuing to develop this community, and we welcome any recommendations you might have for future content. Thanks and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Performance Architects How-To. My name is Andy, and in this how-to we're going to talk about how we can replace the CSS export-import utilities in shared services with the LCM command line utility. As part of this, we'll be discussing the migration definition file, also called as the XML schema. We'll look at the file system components that make up this effort. We'll be setting up an import operation. We will execute the import operation, and then we'll see how we can set up an export. First, we'll look at the migration definition file. This file basically has four sections. The first section is the connections, which has three parts to it. The first one being the shared services connection. This is so that the utility knows which shared service it will be connecting to. The next two are the source and the target connections. The two options for this are either file system or application. And depending on which you choose for the from and which to, this will be either an export operation or an import operation. The next section is the task sequence. You could separate the execution in multiple tasks and give it a sequence ID so they could be executed in predetermined sequence. Then you define what artifacts you want to import or export, and then you define the options for each of the tasks. The first section of the file are the connections. As you can see, there are three connections defined, the first being the shared services, type HSS. The second one here is the file system, type file system, and the third is the application connection. The second section in the file is the tasks, options, and artifacts. So the task section can have multiple task sections in there, each with its own sequence ID, and within this you define your source and the target connections. You also define for the source connections the options and the artifacts that will define this migration. Now we look at the file system components. The file system has two folders, the info folder, which basically has a table of contents, and the resource folder, which has the data to be loaded. The info directory has two files in it, the first being the source info.xml. This tells the utility which version of LCM it is to work with. This is basically a compatibility check because some versions of LCM do not work with other versions of it. The second file being the listing.xml. This is a table of contents that tells the utility where to find the files and what kind of data is within the files. The resource directory actually holds the data that is to be imported, or if it's an export operation, this is where the data would be exported to. Each of the entities is in a separate file, for example users, groups, roles, and provisioning info, and data is arranged in subdirectories with the native directory being on the top, assigned roles below that, and each of the application groups being a folder under the assigned roles. The data is contained in CSV files, which has three sections. The first being the entity. This could be like the pound user, pound group, based on what is being imported or exported. The second line would be the header. This is basically the column headings for the data lines, which is the next section. Now let's look at how we set up a migration. In this we'll have an import example where we'll create a user, we'll create a group in which we'll add the user, and we'll provision the group to reporting and analysis. First we look at the users.csv file. In here we have just one record for an LCM user who will be created in the native directory. Next we have the groups.csv where we have two sections. One is the group section, the other is the group_children section. In the group section we see that we'll be creating an LCM group which will be in the provider of native directory. In the second section we see that we'll be adding the LCM user in the LCM group. And the third file is the reporting and analysis CSV file, which has the provisioning record. In here you see that the LCM group is being provisioned by the Reporting and Analysis Global Administrator role. The third file is the Reporting and Analysis file. In here you have a provisioning record for the LCM group, which is assigned the Reporting and Analysis Global Administrator role. Looking at the directory structure, we see that in the resource directory you have native directory right at the top, underneath which you have the groups and user CSV files, as well as the assigned roles directory. In the assigned roles you have a subdirectory called Reporting and Analysis, under which you have the Reporting and Analysis CSV file. The contents of the info directory are basically the listing.xml and the source info.xml, as is shown in this illustration. Listing.xml, this file in the screen here is an example of the listing.xml, where you see that you have three files indicated: the users.csv, groups.csv, as well as the reporting and analysis.csv, each having a path to the project in which they will be loaded and the type of data that is going to be loaded in them. And here we have the example of the migration definition itself. If you see, the first section is the connections, which defines the three connections, and the second section is the task section, which has the source connection, the target connection, as well as the options. Now let's look at how we execute the migration. The migration can be executed using the utility.bat script, which is under the user project's EPM system bin folder. The only parameter you need to pass to this is the XML file, which is the migration definition. On executing this the first time, you'll be prompted with the username and the password, and after the first run, these credentials are encrypted within the XML file. And as part of the run, it shows which artifacts were imported, as well as the migration status. And after running the execution, when we look at the provisioning report, we see that the LCM user has been provisioned for the role of Reporting and Analysis Global Administrator to the LCM group. Finally, we look at the export migration. Executing this is the same because you'll be using the same utility, and the only difference is the XML file. In this case, if you see that the source and the target connections have been swapped, the source now is the app connection 2, which is the shared services, and the target is now the file system. So data is taken from shared services and exported to the file system. To recap, this is how you would replace the CSS export-import utilities using the LCM command line utility. Thank you for joining, and please visit our Performance Architect How To channel for other videos on enterprise performance management and business